Well, thank you everybody for joining. What I want to talk about today are what you can do in the next 30 days in order to jumpstart your child to become more integrated. So first, just a little bit about myself. My name is Lisa Ann de Garcia. I'm a longtime educator. I started teaching around 1994. I am a brain gym instructor, Bloomberg rhythmic movement training instructor. I'm a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and I have a lot of other little certifications under my belt. I'm also a mom of three boys. My middle one, who is now 21, has moderate to severe autism, and he's actually severely linguistically delayed. Otherwise, he would be classified more as moderate. And again, I am an educator, and what I did was I was a math specialist for many years. And the last 7 years when I was at the schools, I was focusing on, I was like kind of doing math pullout, working with the students who are struggling. And that's when I spent time researching everything I could, trying to figure out why children struggle, why they go to the math teacher and the reading teacher and the getting OT. And so I knew that something else besides mathematics was actually going on. So I was researching, and that's when I became specialist in neurodevelopment and just in general in learning and how the brain develops. I have also written a few books around how to teach mathematics, mostly to teachers, but if you're a homeschool mom, it would some of those books would be applicable to you. Okay, so the objective of this session is just to understand what is at the root of learning and behavior struggle, so we understand what's really going on, and to understand how to support your children's brain development. So first of all, I want us to look at this iceberg as like the metaphor, and so the iceberg itself would be the brain. The tip of the iceberg is what we see in terms of behavior and academics, and the bottom of the iceberg is going to be those underlying things, that the connectivity of the different parts of the brain, but that we can't see. So the obvious is like what the behavior, what the child shows, whether it's how well that they can solve problems, or if their inability or ability to sit still. First of all, this iceberg is nourished in, or kind of created, or I guess just nourished with nutrition and environment. So we all probably can agree that, So we can all agree that we need, good nourishment in order for our brains and our bodies to grow correctly, right? So that's going to include things like, whether or not we're being exposed to, the types of fats, the types of carbohydrates, sugars, colors, vitamins, minerals, whether we have them or whether they're absent. That's all going to play in the nutrition. And then the environment, we have an external environment and an internal environment. So we have things like, stressors, emotional stressors, and we have things like EMF exposure. We also have things like whether or not kids are going outside and playing, whether or not they're spending a lot of time on screen time, whether or not that we have a lot of exposure to EMF. And then we have an internal environment. So how is our body reacting to foods? So there's a cross between the nutrition and the environment. And then down here, we have the brain stem is the very base of the pyramid. So it's the base of our brain. And then we have, over time, there's connections that are made up through the brain up until the frontal cortex. And so it's going to be those connections that we don't see, but we start them as infants. The brain stem is already working when we're born. The whole brain is present when the baby is born, but it's not connected and not fully linked up. So what the baby is doing is its job through movements, and our job as parents through providing sensory input is going to be stimulating the brainstem and develop making connections up through the emotional center, which is in the limbic system, all the way up to the frontal cortex. If we look at this is like this learning ladder, just to kind of give us an idea, this would be the step down here would be at the brainstem, and the step up here would be at the front part of the brain, the frontal cortex. We start with the very, very, very first thing is we have the baby is receiving sensory input, tactile, which is touch, vestibular, which is that balance center, and proprioceptive, which is more like knowing where your body is in space, kind of deep touch. That is the basis of everything. And then over time, we start to develop balance and stability, right? They can lift up their head, they can sit up, they can stand. Awareness of their self outside of this stimulus or in outside stimulus, meaning like, oh, here I have a hand and I have a foot. So, you know, that it's part of their own body. And then we eventually start to integrate the left and the right sides of the body. We develop a midline, we understand center, directionality, left and right. This kind of leads into auditory and visual perception and processing, because you need that right and left on board. Time, rhythm, and sequencing. So, you know, we might know some kids who have really poor ability of keeping time or rhythm. Organization. External organization is going to mirror internal organization. So if their desk is a mess, then that is, it's a mirror into what is happening internally. And then memory, and then academics. So academics, even though when they go to school, that's what, you know, the teacher's kind of job is. But if all these things underneath are not in place, then the academics and the memory is going to be very difficult. So if you already are seeing that your child has some of these missing components, like they, I mean, just all the way down to balance and stability, or even sensory development, they're having sensory processing issues. They have high tolerance for pain, like, so they're not really aware of when they're being touched. That is all the way at the bottom at the brainstem level. And if the brainstem isn't developed, there's going to be very poor connections all the way up through the frontal cortex. And so this, the bottom of the brain, it's kind of like building this foundation of this house. And then as we go up, it's kind of like adding the framing and the walls. And then the school's job is really to put the finishing touches and all the bells and whistles on the brain. So a mature brainstem is needed for focus, coordination, gross motor, fine motor, emotional stability, muscle tone, comprehension, and eye tracking. So if the brainstem is immature and is not getting the right amount of stimulus, all of these things are going to be jeopardized. So the question is what prevents the link up? Technology use for many different reasons. We have, you know, the whole Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi and 5G, that actually gets all the way down to the cellular, to our DNA. So it interferes on a physical level in many ways. It also prevents kids from going outside and playing. It makes their, keeps their eyes in a very fixed position, so they don't have that 3D vision experience. So technology is not helpful. And then we have again, EMF, the electromagnetic frequencies, which is part of the technology, even though they might not be on the technology, but if they're in an area that is very much wired, or once they, because once you get 5G in a neighborhood, it's going to be like the little towers are like every so many 150 yards, I don't know, like it's a very close distance to each other. We have to be very careful about that, because when you hear reports of flocks of birds dying, a lot of times it's because they're testing which frequency they're going to use for 5G. So a lot of people are getting sick from it. And then again, we have lack of outdoor and free unstructured play, and technology can be a reason why they're not going outside. The fact that maybe your neighborhood might not be safe. Maybe you don't even live in a neighborhood, you just live kind of in a city, in an apartment building, or for whatever reason, they're not going outside as much as they should, and that can prevent, because the child's job as a child is basically building their brain through play. Limited movement from car seats, strollers, lack of tummy times. This is for little children. So if they're being toted in car seats or in strollers and they're not asked to walk, but especially tummy time, some babies do not want to lift up their head and they cry, but we have to just make them do it, because the neck reflexes and the neck muscles are very important for the development of the rest of the brain. And chemicals and toxins in our environment, which I didn't put in the environment or mention when we talked about environment, but chemicals and toxins, it's actually kind of the root of all the problems. We're getting chemicals and toxins from another number of different ways. And some of us are even getting it generational. So some people were affected from like the DDT, and that gets into the genes that are passed on from the parents to the children. So we can be acquiring chemicals from back then, and we have chemicals present, whether it's in the cleaning products, in our vaccinations, or in they're spraying all the stuff that they're spraying in the sky. All that stuff comes down, and we're breathing that. So we can't live in a sterile bubble, but we can try to mitigate. And in our house, we have more control of what's going on in our house, and we can make maybe some smarter choices about what chemicals. So cleaning products, for example, baking soda and vinegar go a long way. Toxins in our food. So all our food are being sprayed. The glyphosate, the Roundup. I mean, it's not. Monsanto doesn't own it anymore, but those products are still being sprayed on everything. Even if things are organically grown, a lot of things, once they're cut, then they're still sprayed, and there's a lot of chemical and toxins in our food. And we have gluten and chronic immune reactions and inflammation to gluten and other things. And the reason gluten and dairy, those in particular, are so problematic is because the parts of the protein, the peptides, specific peptides that our immune system could be reacting to, actually looks just like structures of our brain and our thyroid. So a lot of times people who have a thyroid issue, it's actually a gluten issue. And if you have if your body's always responding to gluten, there's the basal ganglia and the cerebellum have structure parts that are that look like these proteins. So your body starts to attack these structures. And the basal ganglia is in the brain, and it's all involved with movement, and so is the cerebellum. So if you get kids who have a lot of movement disorders, that could be a big issue. And the dairy affects the limbic system, which is the emotional system. So if you have things like rage and some emotional meltdowns and stuff, you would definitely want to be looking at dairy. Illnesses during gestation, development, C-section, or other medical issues is another thing that prevents the link up. So, obviously, if there's any kind of sickness, it's going to prevent the brain from developing correctly. And unintegrated primitive reflexes. So primitive reflex is a response to a stimuli. So if you, for example, when the baby, if you move the head back, it startles, or if there's a loud noise and then there's a startle, and then they cross their hands over it and then they cry. So some of those reflexes should be integrated, but in many kids, they are not. And when they're not integrated, those reflexes live in the brainstem, and as they mature, the brainstem is developing. If they don't integrate, the brainstem remains undeveloped. And so basically, inflammation is the base of all of that. So inflammation is preventing. Chemicals result in inflammation, but inflammation is going to result in the link up. So what are the things that we should avoid? We should try to not let our children honor using technology under 2 years old. Okay, so they're even at 2. I mean, it's still they're still little. Their brains are developing. No wireless or EMF in the bedroom where your child sleeps or where you sleep. So you should never sleep with your cell phone. Cell phone should never be under your pillow. You should your router should be turned off at night. move. I always keep my cell phone in another room. Besides, I receive texts from people in other countries, in other time zones. And so otherwise, it's dinging all night long. So I have to keep it away anyway. But you should, your computer should be shut down in your room. You're at night, your brains shrink, detox, it's just shrinking, purging toxins. So you want to not have interference with the Wi-Fi in the router. So just turn off the router at night. And really try to minimize your chemical cleaners. No sugar, artificial colors, flavors. MSG is really bad, especially for kids on the spectrum, kids who perseverate, kids who have well, I'm at a loss for words, but kids who have who are perseverating, and for me, for example, MSG gives me migraines, so I can tell right away because I'm pretty clean. So if I go and eat something, I can tell right away something has MSG or high fructose corn syrup. Those are the two biggies. And then you want to avoid preservatives in the food as well. If you have meltdowns, no dairy. And if there's coordination problems or GI problems, then you want to first look at gluten. And some of the great things is the kids need lots of outdoor play. So they need to roll, climb, on a grassy hill, use bare feet, monkey bars, zip lines, roller slides. When I was in Japan, they have these really long slides. It's like those, like if you go to a warehouse and they put a box down the roller slide, just so the box can go, by itself kind of easy. But in Japan, they have those at most of the playgrounds. They're wonderful. Using bikes with no pedals, which until I was in Japan, I hadn't seen that, but now since I came back, it seems like it's a thing, so that's good. So little kids, when they're learning to ride a bike, use no pedals first, just to learn to get their balance. Deep pressure and rough housing. Some research, there was a study that showed that rough housing with the fathers is one of the best remedies for ADHD. Martial arts, gymnastics, and swimming are 3 sports that are awesome for brain development. So because you're working on a lot of precise, for martial arts, there's a lot of precise. It really affects the muscles and integrating certain reflexes, but it also is that thought. And really thinking about what you're doing. And gymnastics and swimming has a lot to do because of the tumbling and the movement of the vestibular system, which is the balance system, and that is a result of head movement. So moving the body in different planes is really important. Also, we need a whole food diet. You would never put trash in your gas can. So, our bodies, we're pretty resilient, but, it catches up to us over time. And we need a whole food diet. We need good fats. We need protein throughout the day. The protein can come from really good sources of vegetables. It doesn't have to be from a meat, but you need a good source of protein and vegetables. And a good source of a broad range of nutrients. So if you're going to take vitamins and mineral supplements, make sure that they're not from Walmart, that they're good quality. Because if you're going to bother buying them, buy something that is that you can assimilate well, you can break down, and your body's going to use it. Do not look at the ingredients. Do not buy things with a lot of extra fillers. Nothing with the color. Your vitamins and minerals should never have colors. Okay, Flintstone vitamins, you have to make sure that they're good quality. So go to your health food store. They usually have already chosen really good quality brands. So if you want to know exactly what to do for the next 30 days, so as I said, integration of primitive reflexes is really important. And so I have a kind of a little recipe of some things that you can do. It would take about no more than 10 minutes a day. And if you do this for every day, do these series of things every day for the next 30 days, it takes about 21 days to 27 days, they say, to make a neural connection, and then to kind of solidify it. So the more there are movements, the more we move, the more we myelinate our nerves. So we have a nerve, and we have this fatty coating on it, just like our wire has plastic coating. It's like an insulation, and the more coating we have, the faster the signal is. And so the more we do certain movements, the more we can myelinate, and the more as the connections are being made to different parts of our brain, and it's being myelinated, then that connection is stronger. And I will note as a caveat, if you do, let's say you are working for the next 30 days and you see some improvements, and then all of a sudden your child gets sick, you will probably expect for those connections, they were very fragile, to disconnect. So you will need to do the work again once he or she is well. So if you want to know what to do for the next 30 days, then I want you to click the link below, because that is going to give you access and an opportunity to have access to just a very simple series of things that will take you about 10 minutes. And then on the page, it's going to be a series of videos, and they're just going to be really short. But on that page, there's going to be like a recording form. And part of the reason is because I want you to remember, like it'll help you remember what you need to do. And then also as you record and as you make notes, when you finish the 30 days with your notes, and you're going to have some before notes, and you're going to have some after notes. And when you finish filling that up, if you send that to me, then you can get a free gift. So you email that to me, and I will send you a free gift for having gone through that process and being diligent and working with your child. So the most important thing is going to be the frequency. You can do it more than 10 minutes, not at once, but you could do it, let's say you could do them in the morning and at night. Frequency is really important, but it's going to be, you need to do it at least once a day, because if you just do it for 30 minutes once a week, that's not how the brain works. The brain needs repetition on a more constant basis. Okay, so I'm just trying to give you a structure and to encourage you by filling out this form, and send it to me, and then I will send you a gift. And I hope that this information just by itself was very helpful, and I hope you continue to seek the things that you need to help your child. I do love to do things like this, live workshops, courses, on-demand teacher and parent classes, and private consultations. So if you ever feel like you have something that you want to talk about with your child and you're not really sure and you just need a little bit of advice, or if you would like to do whole sessions, either way, you feel free to contact me and I will be so happy to serve you. But until then, I will wait for your recording form so I can send you a free gift.